Hi, my name is Josh Hanum. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Interact. Interact is a software for creating interactive experiences where you can connect with customers at scale. I've been doing this for 12 years. We've built experiences that have been viewed over 1 billion times and have generated over 80 million leads, leading to roughly $80 million in attributable revenue. So we've learned a lot about interaction design online and how that connects up to money. So the broader field here is behavioral economics. And today I want to talk about a really interesting subject that I've noticed in the top experiences created on our platform, which is this idea of default social cognition. Default social cognition is a term that Matthew Lieberman, professor at UCLA, talks about a lot in his book Social. It's the idea that when your mind is at rest, quote unquote, because it's not really ever at rest, but when it's not actively solving a problem, you're not actively thinking about something, your mind is thinking about relationships with other people, your relationship to yourself, and generally just human beings who can be you or the people around you. And how that relates back to experiences on the internet or quizzes, which is the main thing that people build on our platform, is you need your quiz or your experience to be on the topic that people are already thinking about. If you ask them to think about something different, they're not going to. Think about how difficult it is to get somebody to stop what they're doing and then all of a sudden think about what you want them to think about. That's not a thing. People don't do that. So you need to align with what they are thinking about. And according to this default social cognition theory, what they are thinking about is their relationships to other people and their relationship to themselves. If you can align in that way, then you'll be able to build resonance. The definition of resonance is basically, in this context, where you're talking about what somebody's already thinking about and those things line up. So you have resonance. Resonance meaning like you're on the same wavelength. You're talking about the same things. They're thinking about the people in their lives. They're thinking about themselves. You're talking about the people in their lives. You're talking about them. You're asking them about the people in their lives. You're asking them about them. If you can do that, then all of a sudden you become a helpful guide rather than somebody being like, hey, stop what you're doing and think about my thing. You are simply aligning with what they are already thinking about, which is the ideal for creating resonance. So they have a bunch of puzzle pieces. You have a bunch of answers. You're thinking about the same thing. You can be the expert. You can be the guide. That's what you want to be. Your customer is always going to be focused on people. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and every single level of this hierarchy of needs has to do with relationships and people. At the very top was self-actualization. That's your relationship to yourself. That's your understanding of yourself, your understanding of how you show up in the world, all that kind of stuff. Down at the very bottom, even physiological needs, that's still relational because nobody grows their own food. If you do grow your own food, that's awesome. It's a hugely small percentage of the population. So if you are not growing your own food, you rely on other people for your food. And so you have to be in relationship to other people in order to eat, in order to get water, in order to get housing, anything. Nobody does all of this for themselves. And so it makes sense why there is this idea of default social cognition. You have to be thinking about other people to survive as a human being. And so that's why people think about it all the time. Now, how does this relate back to actual quiz experiences that you can have on your website or you can do on social media in order to engage with people, get them to know you better, build a connection, get an email lead from them, and eventually close a sale, whether that sale is like an e-commerce product or a digital product or an educational course, whatever it may be. How do you utilize this idea of default social cognition? Well, you want to ask people about and talk to them about the things that they're already thinking about. The things that they are thinking about are their relationships. So here's an example. This is from the Car Mom. It's a really cool brand. The carmomofficial.com is the website. She has a quiz on that site that helps you find the ideal car for your family. And here's an example of one of the questions where it asks, what is your top feature choice? And the feature choices all have to do with your family and what your family will need and how they will enjoy the car. And that question is addressing something that somebody's already thinking about. They're already thinking about their family. That's why they're taking this quiz. Now, importantly, this is super relevant to the actual topic of the quiz and the topic that the car mom is an expert at. She's an expert at recommending cars. So it's very specific in that way, but it's also tapping into this resonance where that person taking the quiz is already thinking about their family. Now you're asking them about their family and what their family might need. And so they're going to be much more tuned in and engaged when you ask them this question. Next way to utilize this is to ask your customers about their relationships, how they show up in the world. This example here is from NASA's quiz about the Artemis mission. It basically says, what boots will you wear? Which is a nice, fun way of saying, what role would you play if you were on the Artemis mission? How would you be part of the group? And again, this is highly relational. People go throughout their days thinking about, how do I fit in with my friends? How do I fit in at work? How do I fit in with my family? And if you can ask them questions about that and you can have a quiz that's based on that, then you're going to tap into what people are already thinking about according to this theory. And this works. The examples on this quiz all have insane rates of engagement. The average start to completion on these is above 70%. So more than 70% of people who start one of these experiences will finish it, which is just really high, considering that usually people spend 2 to 5 minutes answering this. So you have people highly locked in and engaged answering these questions. But the reason why is because you're asking them about things that they're already thinking about. Now, switching over to a result of a quiz, so this is where you're talking to somebody, you can continue this trend where you're talking about the things that they are thinking about. In this case, this is from Salary Transparent Street, very cool brand. Check them out on Instagram and TikTok. They do interviews with people about salaries, and this quiz basically asks you, are you underpaid? At the end of the quiz, it gives you a reading on whether or not you're underpaid. Importantly, though, this reading is putting context of your peers. You are likely not being underpaid in relation to your peers. Now, I don't know what else you would relate it to, but the fact that it does relate to other people, the people that are around you, again, you've got that resonance and you're tapping into that default social cognition where throughout the day at work, people are thinking about, how am I fitting into this scenario? How am I part of this? Where do I rank in terms of salary? What's going on here? If you can talk to them about that, they're going to pay attention. If you just throw a bunch of stats at them of like, here's the average salaries of all these things, sure, maybe sometimes people will pay attention to that, but more than that, they're going to pay attention to, how do I fit in? And if you can talk to them about that, then they're going to pay attention a lot more. And attention is a very, very valuable asset, as I'm sure you know, if you are working in the world of marketing or messaging or psychology, you're trying to figure out, how do I get people to pay attention? Talk to people about how they fit in. Now, the opposite of this, equal and opposite, is showing people how they stand out. Just like people have a need to fit in, people have a need to stand out. People need to know, how am I different? What is it that makes me unique and me special and me like stand out in the world and make me my own person? This is a critical part of human development, and it doesn't stop once you just become an adult. And so in this case, from Common Era's quiz about which goddess you are, very great quiz, definitely check it out. You are able to see, in this case, you're Athena, but you're able to see which one you are, your unique strengths, your unique characteristics, the things that make you special, that make you uniquely you. If you can talk to people about that, and this doesn't have to be within the context of a quiz, but obviously with a quiz, it works really well because you can ask questions, use the answers to those questions to formulate these results. So it's more direct in that way, but you can gather this data in other ways and then talk to people about how they are unique. That's really special because, again, We go back to the default social cognition. You're thinking about this stuff all day long as a person, even if it's not necessarily conscious. It's unconscious. Like, it's the default. So if you're thinking about it anyways, and then you have this quiz result that tells you what makes you unique, it just kind of goes into the tumbler of like all the things that you're already thinking about. And there's space for it because you're already making space for it by default. And finally, letting people express themselves. This is an important part of relationship, whether it's the relationship to yourself or the relationship to other people. Learning to be able to express yourself, to be able to talk through your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions, very important. And what's interesting is that in our studies, people tell us that they're more honest when they're answering a quiz than they are actually in real life. The reason being that there's no ramifications to answering a quiz. There's nobody that's going to sit there and judge them. It's a very personal experience. And so if you're able to ask people about their relationships, ask them about how do you want to be seen in relation to your peers, things like that, it helps people to feel like they can have this expression. And again, these are things that people are already thinking in their head, and maybe they're afraid to say it out loud, or they feel like they're going to be judged if they say it out loud. If you ask it within the context of a quiz, people like to answer it. So these are just some ways that you can tap into this default social cognition. This concept is super fascinating because I always talk to people about their quiz ideas and how they're building their experiences. And one of the big things that I often have to kind of steer people on and provide some direction on is, how do I frame this quiz? What do I ask and how do I ask it? And what do I tell people at the end? And the really easy answer is that people are thinking about their relationships and they're thinking about themselves. They're thinking about their relationships and themselves within a particular concept. Like this last example here, this is from Advice with Erin. Also check out her work. It's really great. This is a career type quiz, but the questions being asked about your career are in the context of your relationships and the context of you. They're not just like, which of these jobs do you think is the best? It's related back to your actual life. And so if you can tap into what people are thinking about, which is themselves and other people, in the context of whatever it is in particular that you or your brand or your business is most helpful with, then people are going to pay attention because you're going to resonate with them. You're going to have this nice resonance where you're talking about the same things that they're thinking about. And that's the key to driving that great engagement. So hopefully you found this helpful. I thought this was fascinating to see the crossover between Matthew Lieberman's work in the book Social and the data that we've gathered from all the quizzes that have been built on our platform, and just to kind of see how tapping into that default social cognition does really help and drive engagement rates. So this is something to think about, whether you're building a quiz on our platform or you're building an experience of your own, or you're just thinking about the messaging on your website. Keeping in mind that people are always going throughout their day thinking about their relationships and their relationship to self, I think puts you in the right frame of mind to really dial in and write content, write questions, write results that resonate with people very strongly.